Hi, and welcome to this demonstration on paper. This is hot pressed. This is cold pressed. It has a very slight texture. And this one is rough paper. It has about double the texture of the cold pressed. So I wanted to paint the same bird on each sheet to show you the differences. Your finished product will come out quite different, which we'll go over at the end. So for drawing the bird, this is also going to be like a tutorial on how to paint a little bit here. So I just think of the head as a circle and the body as an oval. So you'll see here that I'm drawing, and I drew kind of light. Hopefully you can see that okay. But I do the oval and the circle first, and then I go in and I start adding the details. So whenever I draw, I grab the big shapes first. And I think a lot of artists do this. You look at everything as just a big shape. Don't think of what it is, except for the shape that it is. So I grab the big shape first, and then I come in and I add the details. So the circle for the head, the oval for the body, and then you go in and add the wing, and that's fairly oval, and it's got the little point tip, and then the tail's kind of, I don't know, triangular or rectangular. The eye is roundish, but really look at eyes because they're usually not a perfect circle. On birds, a little more so, but there's still like an almondy shape there. And just really look and think of them, they sit in the skull. So you think of them that way and you'll get a better representation of the eye. And then the beak, of course, is like a triangle basically. So I just kept it real simple. I'm not getting exact in my drawing by any means. And then when I go in with the paint, I will, define things better and get more detailed. So when you're going in with the paint, you start thinking more about values. So your darkest darks and where you want to keep the lightest part, especially the whites, you want to consider that so that you can leave them white. So you wouldn't want to put any paint there. You can lift out a little bit, but it won't be purely white anymore. So I'm painting a black-capped chickadee, which we have here in Colorado. And I just really like these birds. They do this really fun sound. We always say it's bee boo. That's what it sounds like in the morning. Some people say it's yoo-hoo, but I think they're really cute. And I've never actually seen one, but I hear them all the time. So I thought they would be very fun to paint. So here I am just I mix up the black. I don't have a black, so I was using some blue and purple and burnt sienna to make this. I used like I think it's a phthalo blue because it's pretty dark, and then the purple is also very dark. You have Carbazole Violet, and then I mixed that with burnt sienna so it gets a nice black color. And then I'm adding that blue, the phthalo blue in there, and so I'm really using just those three colors the whole time. So then I'll use the blue, just maybe muted down a little bit with the burnt sienna, and I'll use the burnt sienna on its own, or I'll mix a little of the blue in there, and it makes your painting very cohesive. So just three colors. I do put, on this one, I do put a little green. I don't know how I did, but it's sap green if you want to do that. But so on this hot press paper, it's very smooth. So you see your brush strokes a lot better. And I feel like at first it absorbs the paper and dries a lot faster. I've heard that, and I'm pretty sure it's true, because you don't have any of the texture, so you don't have water pooling anywhere really. So it just soaks it right in. So you have less working time, is always how I feel when I use hot press. I like hot press, but I wouldn't use it for, like, say, this bird. I feel like it comes out more illustrative looking than I would want it to. If I was doing like one of my little animals that I put clothes on or whatever, I would use it for that. Just more detailed. Like when I want something really loose looking, I would not ever use hot press. I don't know how to do it. There may be some artists that do, but I can't get my artwork to look very loose. I probably just need to use more water would be my guess, if I want it to look looser on the hot press. But the cold press and the rough are easier to have. I feel like the watercolor like paints itself a little easier on those textured papers, but I did want to show you the hot press. I like it, but it does dry a lot faster. If I'm wrong, let me know, but that's what it seems like, and it really soaks in that paint right away. And you notice it's more muted, and I am working to mix my paint at the same value, but I don't know. So That's just my opinion of the hot press, and I like it for detailed work. Like I said, if I'm going to be more illustrative, if you're going to scan your artwork, it's easier to scan too. So there are benefits to the hot press. So I'm just going to keep on painting here on the hot press, and then we'll move over to the cold press, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Okay, now we'll move over to the cold press. I will go back to the hot press and add a little more value. As you can see, it faded back quite a bit, so I'll add some more layers. But immediately on the cold press, you can see how this bead of water sticks around in the texture, and you have a little more time to move that around. That also creates some value shifts on its own too. If you go in with a damp brush, it's easier to move around. And I don't know, it's just, I really like the texture paper. You know, cold press has some texture, whereas I would say the rough paper has about double the texture of the cold press. I paint a lot on rough paper now. I really like it for landscape, I really like for the bird painting, for anything. So as far as cold press and rough paper go, it's just that rough paper has a little more texture. So you can get some pretty cool effects on there, I think. But I like them both quite a bit. So you can already see the difference here, where your brush strokes aren't quite as obvious on the cold press paper. And for both all these birds, I'm really, the main technique I'm using is just the paper is dry, and I am going in with wet paint. That's all. So, and then you can lift out really easily on cold press and rough, because it's kind of sitting on that texture a little more, so it doesn't soak in quite as quickly. And it kind of paints itself, like you'll get the look of the feathers a little easier just because of the texture, and you can play with that. You can go in and dab, see how long that's staying wet, see how it's still shiny there. So yeah, the water is just kind of pooling a little bit in the texture there. And then I feel like the colors stay more vibrant. I don't know if that's just me or if I mix the colors differently, but and I did definitely use more blue on this one, but yeah, it seems like it does dull down a little more on hot press, but you can go in and layer, and I could be totally wrong on that, but I will experiment with that more. I haven't done as much on hot press as I have with the cold press and the rough. Like I said, I just think they're easier to work with. For scanning, the hot press is awesome though. It's smooth, and you don't get any shadowy effects when you scan. So there's that. And then going in and doing these details and things, and drawing on the textured paper can be a little bit more challenging, but I'm not trying to draw anything too detailed, and I'm trying to be loose anyway, and I actually would have liked these to come out a little looser, so I'm still practicing at that, but just showing you how to do this and just keeping your values in mind will make your painting come out pretty good, so and experimenting with different papers and different paints, different pigments, you'll see that you'll get different results. And the paper, I mean, in the paint, I think it can make a huge difference. So if you're getting frustrated that yours isn't coming out and you see this other artist, I mean, it could be the quality of the paper or paints you're using. If you're not using professional grade paint, it's not as pigmented. And then if you're not using like 100% cotton paper, it's going to make a big difference. So I like Arches the best. I also like Fabriano. That's my second favorite. I haven't tried all the papers though, so I have tried several, but not all of them. And I know some people like some other kinds a lot too, so I may try more. But I just really wanted to show you the differences in the texture of the paper and how that affects your painting, because I'm not really going in that different on these. I don't think. I'm not trying to anyway. So just to show you how, like over to the left, the hot press one, it just looks more, I don't know, more drawn in a way to me, whereas already this cold press one, it looks more watercolory and painterly to me. So and it has these really beautiful textures, and that's all from the paper, and then the way that the pigment may separate in those textures and things. And then for painting, so I've let some areas dry pretty well. If I go back in and it's a little wet, just make sure you're going in with more paint on your brush than water. You don't want to go in with a lot of water if you have a wet area, because you'll create a blossom, and that's just where it blooms out, and it makes like almost like a blotchy look. You can do those on purpose when you want to, but you don't want to mess up your painting and do it on accident where you don't want one. So and that's what I'm doing there. And then if a layer is pretty well dry and I go over it to glaze or something, I go very lightly, and I'm going, all these colors work well together so you don't create any mud or ugly color that you don't want. And then right there I was lifting a little bit up and smoothing out a harder edge. Like, so you try to get those, they're almost like edges. So under the wing there, that's a very defined edge. That's like a hard edge. And then you get the soft edge up like on his back there where the sun's hitting, or up even on his forehead there. And it shows light, and you can just use those to direct your viewer and to accentuate light and shadow. So now I'm going on to the rough paper, and I really don't think that it looks that different from the cold press paper. They come out very, very, very similar, and looking at them up close and everything, they're super similar. I like the rough paper a lot. I like the cold press a lot. Like I said, the rough paper is, if you hold them up next to each other, it looks like double the texture. So it's fun because look at you can see how it's putting texture in that paint on his head, so it looks like feathers. It helps it paint itself. It's just very, very cool. So I'm using the same techniques, and so if an area is wet, if you're like totally new to watercolor, if the area is wet and you touch a color to the other color, it'll start to mix together on the paper, which is always a very beautiful effect. And I like to do that rather than mixing the color, because it looks more flat when you mix it on the palette and you bring it over. So if you let them mingle on the paper and stuff, you get a lot of neat things happening. And then you can go on with a damp brush and just touch areas, and that'll start to flow. So the watercolor pigment's going to go wherever water is. So that's why when you have the most control right now, because I'm going on to dry paper. Now when I come back in, any area that's still wet that I touch, the new pigment that I'm putting down will go there, or I'll pull down some of the pigment that's already on the paper. So it'll follow the water. And then you can I use like a tissue, Kleenex, to dab, because it's smooth. Like some paper towels have a pattern on it, so I don't want to press the pattern into my painting. Also, Viva paper towels are also smooth, so you can use those, and they work well to dab up any extra paint or water that you want to pick up. And you can always layer over to deepen the values, which I will be doing. And you can do it while it's still wet. Like I said, it just makes sure. The key is timing with watercolor, and I don't have my timing totally down by any means, so I'm still learning. But sometimes I think it's nice to learn from a beginner, because I remember and I know, and I'm not so good that I don't think not to tell you these things. So if you go in, with really watery paint, it's like going to be a really light color. And then if you want to come back in with more pigment on your brush, so when you mix it up, I've had different teachers call it different things. Some call it the consistency, I believe they call it cream, milk, and tea. And then some will call it honey, and a lot of them call it milk and then tea. But I've heard different things. But anyway, then you get the idea. So the really runny one would be like the tea, and then the middle one would be milk, and then the thickest would be cream. And so the cream, when you try to run your brush through that, it'll leave a mark, and like it won't go right back together on your palette. And then where you can tell how thick it is, the most watery one, when you run your brush through that, it just stays as a little puddle. And then the milk, when you run your brush through it, the line will stay there for a second, but not very long. And then the cream, again, it'll stay there for a while before it returns to a puddle. So if you have gone on your paper with like the tea consistency or the real watery one, you'd be safe to go in there for a while it's wet with a thicker paint. So the milk or the cream. So, and you won't get a blossom. But if you go in, like if you laid down first cream and then you go in with the tea, you're going to make a blossom and you're going to make streaks and stuff because you have to let that dry. Or else it's going to push the paint around. All that water will push the paint around. So you just have to know timing with watercolor so you don't get those things happening. And of course, the more water you use, the more watercolory it will look, the prettier it is. And I am still trying to get myself to use more water. I'm kind of in between right now, and I'm trying to learn to go in with my dark values. Like there's some painters, I think they call it alla prima. They can go right in and paint this thing in one shot. They don't have to layer. But so here's the hot press up close. Here's the cold press up close, and see the difference in the texture already. It looks like little feathers almost. It painted itself in some spots right there. Look at that. And then here is the rough. And I just really like how it does fences or wood too. It looks very grainy. But you can see that the cold press and the rough, I don't think they look too different, but you can see a big difference there on the hot press. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you have any questions or comments or anything I can cover in future videos, please let me know. I would love it if you like and subscribe. And you can follow me over on Instagram at Christy Dranak. Thanks again and happy painting.